There comes a moment in life when you look at yourself and realize you are no longer who you once were. The person you used to be feels like a memory, almost like an old skin you've quietly shed. Growth is silent, subtle, and yet undeniable. The first signal is when the things that once entertained you no longer do. The noise, the drama, the empty conversations, you feel a quiet disinterest. What once felt important now feels shallow, and you crave depth instead of distraction. There comes a time when the very things that once fascinated you, the activities, the shows, the endless distractions that used to keep your mind occupied, suddenly feel hollow. You begin to sense that the excitement they once gave you was temporary, fleeting, like sugar that energizes for a moment, but leaves you empty afterward. This shift isn't loud. It doesn't happen with a sudden crash, but quietly. You find yourself scrolling through the same content, watching the same people, hearing the same repetitive noise, and instead of feeling alive, you feel drained. That is the first whisper that you have begun to outgrow the old you. The old you needed noise, needed distraction, needed the temporary rush of stimulation to avoid facing the quiet. But the new you is beginning to crave something different. It is a strange moment because, at first, it feels like boredom. You wonder why you don't enjoy the same things anymore. The series you once watched with excitement now seems repetitive. The gossip that once entertained you feels childish. The late nights of meaningless conversations, the constant social scrolling, the things that once gave you a sense of belonging suddenly leave you feeling disconnected. It is not that these things have changed, it is you who has shifted. Your soul is signaling that you are searching for depth, for something real, something that nourishes instead of numbs. When you start to lose interest in what once entertained you, people around you may not understand. They might ask why you don't join in, why you're quieter, why you seem distant. They don't see that inside you there is a silent awakening. Your values are rearranging themselves. You are beginning to seek conversations that carry weight, moments that carry meaning, spaces that give peace instead of noise. You crave a different kind of fulfillment, one that comes not from constant stimulation, but from stillness, clarity, and truth. This change can be unsettling because the world around you keeps spinning in the same cycles, while you stand apart, watching. You feel the pull toward books that challenge your perspective, instead of stories that waste your time. You feel drawn toward listening to your own thoughts, instead of drowning them out with endless chatter. You may even notice that the music you once loved no longer resonates, and you sit in silence instead, not because you are sad, but because the silence feeds you in ways noise never did. This is growth, and it is subtle but powerful. There is an inner maturity that comes when you no longer look for entertainment to fill your emptiness, but instead look for understanding to expand your being. You begin to ask deeper questions. What is the purpose of my time? Who am I becoming when I consume this? Does this bring me closer to who I truly want to be? Or does it keep me chained to the old version of myself? When you notice that your answers no longer align with your old habits, you recognize that you are stepping into a different version of you. This loss of interest is not a loss at all. It is an invitation to grow. It is your soul rejecting the shallow so it can embrace the profound. It is the part of you that knows life is too short to waste on meaningless cycles, calling you toward experiences that awaken, not distract. And though at first it may feel lonely, this shift is the first sign that you are moving into a new chapter of your becoming, one where your mind seeks truth and your heart seeks peace rather than noise. One of the clearest signals that you've outgrown the old you is the way your circle begins to change. It doesn't usually happen in one dramatic moment, but rather in subtle ways that you notice over time. People you once spoke to every day begin to fade into the background. Conversations that once felt lively now seem repetitive, shallow, or draining. You realize that you are no longer aligned with certain energies, and while you may still care for these people, the bond that held you together has shifted. This change doesn't come from judgment, nor from anger, nor from the need to cut ties aggressively. It happens naturally, like how leaves fall from trees when seasons change. The connections that no longer serve your growth simply loosen their grip. It can be difficult to accept at first, because relationships often define how we see ourselves. When you were the old you attracted people who mirrored that version of you. They resonated with your habits, your interests, your patterns, even your wounds. But as you grow, as your values shift, the mirror changes. You may find that certain people now reflect parts of you that you have already released. Being around them can feel heavy, as though they are pulling you back into the old patterns you no longer want. And without even trying, distance forms. You may not call as often. You may not feel the same urge to meet. The bond isn't broken with anger, but it quietly fades because you are walking in different directions. This can bring feelings of guilt. You may ask yourself, why am I pulling away? Why don't I feel the same connection anymore? But this guilt only exists because you are holding onto an old definition of loyalty. Growth doesn't mean betrayal. It means your soul is prioritizing alignment over familiarity. You still have love for those people, but you know that your energy belongs where it can grow, not where it is stifled. This is the natural rhythm of life. Every stage attracts its own companions. At the same time, you begin to notice new people entering your life. They may not always look like the ones you imagined, but when you connect, it feels effortless. Conversations flow with depth. You feel understood without needing to explain yourself. There is no pressure to pretend or shrink. These new connections reflect your current energy, your current growth, and being around them feels nourishing instead of draining. It is not about having more people, but about having the right people. Those who inspire you, challenge you, and remind you of who you are becoming rather than who you once were. There's also a shift in the way you value your relationships. In the past, you may have chased after connections, seeking validation, fearing loneliness, or trying to hold on tightly to anyone who gave you attention. But as you grow, that need softens. You no longer cling to people out of fear. You allow them to leave if they must. You trust that those who are meant to stay will stay. This calmness in relationships is a powerful sign that you are no longer the old you. Sometimes people will notice this change before you even do. They may say you've changed, become distant, or that you are different now. And they are right. You have changed. You are no longer trying to fit into the version of yourself that once kept them comfortable. You are allowing yourself to step into a truer version of you, and not everyone can come along on that journey. That is not cruelty. It is growth. Your circle shifting is not a coincidence. It is a reflection of your inner evolution. As your energy changes, your connections either rise with you or fall away. And in this quiet rearranging of your relationships, life is showing you that you are stepping into a new alignment, one where only what matches your soul will remain. Another signal that you've outgrown the old you is when silence and solitude begin to feel more comforting than constant chatter and company. There was a time when being alone felt unbearable, when silence felt heavy, even frightening, as though you needed sound, people, or activity to reassure you that you were alive and connected. The old you may have filled every quiet space with noise, turning on the television for background sound, scrolling endlessly through your phone, or surrounding yourself with others just to avoid sitting with your own thoughts. But now something inside you has shifted. You find that the absence of noise is not empty, it is full. Silence begins to feel like a sanctuary, a place where you can hear not just the world, but yourself. At first, this change may feel strange. You might wonder why you don't crave social interaction the way you once did, why parties or endless conversations that once excited you now feel draining. You may even start to notice that when you spend time in loud environments, your energy feels scattered, as though something important within you is being drowned out. It is because your soul has grown to value the stillness where truth can be heard. In silence, you connect with your inner voice, and this voice becomes more precious to you than the noise of the world. The old you needed external distractions to fill the void, but the new you has begun to realize that peace comes from within, and silence is the path that leads you there. This comfort with solitude is not isolation. It does not mean you reject others or withdraw from the world completely. Instead, it means that your relationship with yourself has deepened to the point where you no longer fear your own company. You begin to enjoy spending time alone, not because you are running from others, but because being alone allows you to recharge, reflect, and align with your truth. It becomes a conscious choice rather than a forced condition. You learn that solitude does not equal loneliness. It is freedom, it is intimacy with the self, it is the space where growth takes root. As you settle into this newfound appreciation for quiet, you start to observe things differently. You notice details you once overlooked. The sound of your breath, the rhythm of your thoughts, the way your body feels when it finally relaxes without the pull of external demands. Silence allows you to process what has been buried beneath constant distraction. It gives you clarity about what matters and what doesn't. It reveals answers you were too busy to hear before. There is also a strength that comes from no longer needing to fill every silence with words. In the past, you might have spoken just to be heard, or to avoid awkward pauses, or to prove your place in a group. Now, you realize that silence can speak louder than noise. You begin to respond less and listen more. You notice the way others speak, the emotions behind their words, the truths that exist in what is left unsaid. This shift in how you relate to silence changes the way you engage with people and with life itself. When solitude becomes your ally, you no longer depend on others to keep you entertained or distracted. You stop looking for validation in crowded rooms and start finding it in your own presence. The world may not understand why you prefer quiet moments, why you choose to spend evenings reflecting instead of chasing stimulation, but you understand. The peace you find in silence is no longer negotiable. It is a sign that you are stepping away from the restless patterns of your old self and moving into a deeper alignment with your own spirit. Another sign that you've outgrown the old you is when old habits and patterns begin to fall away effortlessly. The things you once clung to so tightly, the routines that shaped your days, the behaviors that felt almost impossible to change, begin to lose their grip on you. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like a constant battle against yourself. It feels natural. What once seemed necessary now feels heavy. What once provided comfort now feels like a chain. Without even realizing it, you start to release the very things that used to define you. And in that release, you notice how far you've come. There is a time in life when change feels almost impossible. You try to break a habit, and you fail. You promise yourself you won't repeat the same patterns, and yet you find yourself doing it again. You think maybe you're weak. Maybe you're not disciplined enough. Maybe you don't have the strength. But when growth happens within, true growth, it doesn't require struggle the way you once thought. The desire for the old habit dissolves. The pattern feels outdated, almost irrelevant, as though it belongs to someone you no longer are. You don't have to fight it anymore because you don't resonate with it anymore. It might be the late nights of wasting time, the unhealthy foods you once craved, the endless scrolling, the constant need for validation, or even the toxic cycles of arguing, overthinking, or running from your own emotions. These habits were once coping mechanisms, ways your old self dealt with pain, emptiness, or lack of awareness. But when you grow, you don't need them anymore. They stop serving you, and your soul knows it. You feel the shift inside that says, "This is not who I am anymore." Others may still see you as the person you once were, and they may even tempt you to return to those old patterns. They might invite you back into the routines you have already outgrown, not out of malice, but because that's the version of you they know. And in those moments, you notice something powerful. You no longer feel the same pull. Where you once struggled to say no, now you find peace in your decision. Where you once felt the fear of missing out, now you feel clarity. It's not about resisting temptation. It's about recognizing that temptation doesn't belong to you anymore. This falling away of habits is not about discipline alone. It's about alignment. When your energy shifts, when your awareness deepens, the old ways simply don't fit. Like a child who outgrows a toy, you can no longer find joy in the same distractions. Like clothes that no longer fit your body, you can't wear the same patterns of thought and action. They don't feel like you anymore, and the discomfort of holding onto them outweighs any temporary relief they give. There is freedom in this. You begin to trust yourself more because you realize you're no longer at war with your own habits. You see that transformation isn't always about force, it's about allowing yourself to evolve. And in that evolution, you learn that the things you once thought were impossible to release were never permanent. They were only attachments of the old self, and when the old self fades, so do they. This is why one day you suddenly notice you don't crave the same things, you don't respond in the same ways, you don't fall into the same traps, and it feels almost effortless, as if something deep within you simply decided, it's time to let go. This quiet letting go is one of the clearest signs that you've stepped beyond who you once were and are stepping fully into who you are becoming. Another sign that you've outgrown the old you is the way your response to pain begins to shift. In the past, even the smallest discomfort could trigger an immediate reaction. Anger, resistance, defensiveness, or even blame. Pain felt like an enemy that you needed to fight against at all costs. Something unfair that was happening to you. Something that made you feel powerless. You may have spent so much energy trying to escape it, distract yourself from it, or bury it so deep that you wouldn't have to face it. But as you grow, pain begins to take on a different meaning. You realize it is not here to destroy you, but to teach you. You notice that the way you respond to it has softened. Instead of immediate resistance, you feel patience. Instead of bitterness, you find understanding. Instead of fear, you discover strength. This shift does not happen overnight. It begins with small moments, times when you face a challenge and notice that you are calmer than you would have been before. Maybe someone criticizes you, and instead of reacting with anger, you pause and reflect. Maybe something doesn't go the way you planned, and instead of spiraling into frustration, you choose to adapt. The pain is still there, the disappointment is still real, but the way you carry it is different. You no longer collapse under its weight, because you have grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient. When you start responding to pain with acceptance, it doesn't mean you stop feeling it. It means you stop fighting against it as though it is your enemy. You begin to see that every difficulty carries a hidden lesson. Every heartbreak reveals a new truth. Every loss creates space for growth. You no longer see yourself as a victim of circumstances, but as a student of life, learning through every trial. This doesn't make the hurt vanish, but it changes the way you hold it. Pain becomes something that shapes you rather than something that breaks you. There is a quiet dignity in this shift. Where you once might have screamed, complained, or lashed out, now you sit with your emotions and allow them to pass through you. You understand that resisting only makes them stronger, while acceptance allows them to move and eventually dissolve. This is not weakness. It is a deep strength. It takes courage to face discomfort without hiding, without numbing yourself, without pretending it isn't there. And as you practice this again and again, You realize that pain no longer has the same power over you that it once did. This new way of responding also changes your relationships. When others hurt you, you no longer rush to retaliate. You no longer need to prove your point with anger or defend yourself with walls. Instead, you observe, you understand, and you decide with clarity how to move forward. Sometimes that means forgiving, sometimes that means letting go. But either way, you no longer let pain dictate your choices. You let wisdom guide you instead. And when life throws challenges your way, the kind that once would have left you broken, you find yourself standing tall, not because the challenge is easier, but because you are stronger. You see pain now as part of the process, as a signal that you are moving, changing, evolving. You meet it with patience because you trust that it carries meaning. You meet it with gratitude because, deep down, you know it is shaping you into someone you could never have become without it. This transformation in the way you hold pain is one of the clearest indicators that you've stepped into a new version of yourself. The old you reacted with fear and resistance, but the new you receives pain with openness, learns from it, and allows it to carve out a deeper strength within you. Another sign that you've outgrown the old you is when the need for validation begins to disappear. There was a time when everything you did was shaped by how others saw you, when the approval of those around you felt like proof that you were enough. The compliments, the likes, the recognition, the applause, all of it felt like fuel, and without it you questioned your worth. You may have tried to adjust yourself to fit expectations, wearing masks just to be accepted, suppressing parts of who you really were to keep others comfortable. But then comes a shift, subtle at first, powerful as it grows, where you no longer crave that constant reassurance. You begin to realize that no amount of validation can give you the peace that comes from within. This change often starts when you notice how temporary external validation really is. Someone praises you, and for a moment you feel light, but soon the feeling fades and you find yourself chasing it again. The cycle becomes exhausting. You begin to see how fragile it is to build your sense of self on opinions that shift from moment to moment. You realize that the very people you once tried to impress may not even remember what you did, and yet you sacrificed your truth to gain their approval. Growth shows you that this is no longer worth it. The emptiness you felt between each compliment was not failure. It was your soul telling you that validation must come from a deeper place. As this realization sinks in, your actions begin to change. You start making decisions based not on how they will look to others, but on how they feel to you. You stop asking, "What will people think?" and instead ask, "Does this align with who I am becoming?" The shift is quiet, but it changes everything. You no longer feel the urge to post every success, to explain every choice, to prove your worth through display. You understand that what is real doesn't need to be announced, and what is true doesn't need to be defended. This detachment from validation does not mean arrogance. It does not mean you reject feedback or refuse to listen to others. It means that your sense of identity is no longer fragile, no longer at the mercy of outside approval. You can hear praise without becoming inflated, and you can hear criticism without crumbling. You begin to walk with a quiet confidence, one that does not need to shout or prove anything. The old you needed to be seen to feel worthy, but the new you knows that worth is inherent, unshakable, and independent of recognition. There is a deep peace that comes with this shift. You notice that the opinions of others no longer trigger you the way they once did. If someone misunderstands you, you no longer rush to explain yourself. If someone disapproves, you no longer feel the need to beg for acceptance. You recognize that not everyone will see you clearly, and that is not your burden to carry. You no longer measure your growth by applause, but by the way you feel in your own skin. This freedom allows you to live more authentically. You take risks you once avoided, not because you are fearless, because you are no longer bound by the weight of external judgment. You let yourself try, fail, learn, and rise without needing the world to cheer for you. And in this, you discover that real confidence is not loud, it is steady. It does not need to perform, it simply exists. It radiates from within, unaffected by the shifting opinions of those outside. Letting go of the need for validation is one of the most powerful signs of growth, because it means you have turned inward to find what you once searched for everywhere else. It means you have learned to trust yourself, to honor your own voice, and to find peace in being who you are without waiting for anyone to confirm it. Growth rarely announces itself with noise. It arrives quietly, in the way your interests shift, in the way your relationships change, in how you find comfort in silence, in the effortless release of old habits, in the softening of your response to pain, and in the calm confidence that no longer depends on outside approval. These signals are not random, they are the unfolding of your transformation. They show you that you are not the same as before, that you have shed an older version of yourself and stepped into something truer, deeper, and more aligned with who you were always meant to be. The old you served its purpose, but the new you is ready to carry you forward.